clock strikes midnight. Shadows dance on the walls, and the air grows heavy with a chilling presence. Tonight, I invite you to step into the world of the eerie and the unexplained. 3 terrifying tales await you. Stories of restless ghosts, malevolent demons, and mysteries that defy all logic. Are you brave enough to uncover the secrets lurking in the shadows? These aren't just stories. They're whispers from the abyss. So, dim the lights, lock your doors, and prepare yourself. Once you hear these tales, you'll never look at the dark the same way again. Welcome to the Haunting Hour, where fear takes center stage. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above me as I sat hunched over my textbook. My tiny apartment felt like a prison cell, walls closing in with the weight of deadlines and exams. My eyes ached from staring at the pages, the words blurring together in a fog of exhaustion. I needed air. Without much thought, I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door, the cool night whispering promises of reprieve. The woods behind my apartment complex stretched like an ocean of shadows, mysterious and inviting. I had walked the trail countless times before, a well-trodden path that cut through the heart of the forest. Tonight, though, the air felt heavier, as if the trees held their breath, watching. The crunch of leaves underfoot was soothing at first. I let my mind drift, my senses dulling as I moved deeper into the woods. That's when I saw it, a faint shimmer off the trail, almost like moonlight catching on water. Intrigued, I stepped off the path, weaving between towering oaks and low-hanging branches. There, in the middle of a glade, stood a mirror. It was massive, oval-shaped, and framed in intricate black metal that seemed to twist and writhe like vines. The glass shimmered unnaturally, a dark, almost liquid surface that reflected the world around it in muted tones. My breath hitched. How had this gotten here? Who would leave such a thing in the middle of nowhere? I approached, the forest around me growing eerily silent. Even the wind seemed to die, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. My fingers twitched, itching to touch the glass, to confirm it was real. I reached out slowly, the surface rippling like water beneath my fingertips. Suddenly, the world lurched. A cold force yanked me forward, and I stumbled. No, fell into the mirror. Darkness engulfed me, a suffocating void that seemed to stretch endlessly. My scream was swallowed whole as I tumbled through the abyss. When I finally landed, it was not on the forest floor. I found myself in a world that was both familiar and alien. The trees were twisted caricatures of what they had been, their gnarled branches reaching like claws toward a blood-red sky. The ground beneath me was soft and uneven, covered in something that felt disturbingly like flesh. A sickly fog curled around my ankles, its touch icy. I staggered to my feet, my breath shallow and quick. This was wrong. Everything about this place was wrong. As I moved, the shadows seemed to move with me, shifting unnaturally. I wasn't alone. Shapes flitted at the edge of my vision, indistinct but menacing. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and distant wails echoed faintly, a symphony of despair that set my teeth on edge. I pressed forward, every step a battle against the rising tide of panic. The landscape seemed to change as I moved, the ground twisting and warping beneath me. Trees melted into grotesque statues, their faces frozen in expressions of agony. A black river cut through the land, its surface crawling with things I dared not identify. And then I saw it. A shadow, impossibly tall and thin, loomed in the distance. It moved with an unnatural grace, its elongated limbs bending in ways that defied reason. Eyes, or what I thought were eyes, burned like embers in its featureless face. It was watching me. My stomach dropped as it took a step forward, the ground trembling beneath its weightless stride. I turned and ran, heart pounding as the shadow pursued me, silent and relentless. My breath came in ragged gasps, the air thick and heavy, each step harder than the last. The landscape offered no solace. I stumbled through a field of writhing hands that clawed at my legs. their touch cold and hungry. I crossed a bridge made of bones, the river below writhing with pale, eyeless creatures that reached upward with gaping maws. All the while, the shadow creature followed, its presence an oppressive weight that pressed against my very soul. I don't know how long I ran. Time had no meaning here, each second stretching into eternity. My body screamed for rest, but I couldn't stop, not with that thing so close. The forest closed in around me, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. My vision blurred, tears streaming down my face as I fought to stay ahead. Finally, I stumbled into another clearing, my legs giving out beneath me. The mirror stood at its center, a beacon of unnatural light in the suffocating darkness. Relief surged through me, but it was short-lived. The shadow was there, emerging from the trees with slow, deliberate steps. I scrambled to my feet, every instinct screaming at me to reach the mirror. My hands found its surface, the glass cold and unyielding. The shadow loomed closer, its ember-like eyes burning holes into my mind. Desperation overtook me, and I slammed my palms against the glass. It gave way. I fell forward, the familiar chill of the void swallowing me once more. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the forest, the mirror nowhere to be seen. My body trembled violently, my clothes torn and stained with dirt and blood. The woods were silent again, but the weight of the other world lingered, a specter in my mind. I ran home without looking back, the memory of burning eyes etched into my soul. Even now, as I sit here, safe within the confines of my apartment, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. The shadows seem darker, the silence heavier, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I see it waiting, watching. The mirror may be gone, but I know the door it opened remains. The moment I stepped through the heavy double doors of Blackwood High, I knew something was wrong. The air inside was suffocating thick, almost like I was walking into a place that had been sealed away for years. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows across the cracked tile floors. I adjusted the straps of my backpack and took a deep breath, the faint scent of mildew and decay filling my lungs. It was my first day at this school, and already I wished I could turn back. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of me, lockers standing like silent sentinels on either side. A few students loitered near the walls, their faces pale and expressionless. Their eyes followed me as I walked past, unblinking. I nodded at one of them, a girl with long, stringy hair. She didn't nod back. Instead, her lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile that didn't reach her eyes. My heart skipped a beat. By the time I reached my locker, the feeling of unease had blossomed into full-blown dread. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. The hallway was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears and makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. My fingers fumbled with the combination lock, the metal cold and unforgiving against my skin. It took 3 tries to get it open. "Get it together," I muttered under my breath, my voice barely audible over the oppressive silence. The first few hours passed in a blur, but not because I wasn't paying attention. It was the way the teachers spoke, their voices monotone, their eyes glassy and distant. The students around me scribbled in their notebooks, their heads down, never acknowledging my presence. It was as if I didn't exist. The clock on the wall seemed to tick slower than normal, each second dragging on like an eternity. By lunchtime, the oppressive atmosphere had only worsened. The cafeteria was dimly lit, the overhead lights casting strange, shifting patterns on the walls. I sat at an empty table, my tray untouched. The food looked off. The meat was gray and glistening, the vegetables wilted and slimy. Across the room, a group of students sat together, their heads bowed as if they were whispering to each other. But their mouths weren't moving. A chill ran down my spine, and I pushed my tray away, appetite gone. I decided to explore the school instead. Maybe I could find a quiet corner to collect my thoughts, to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. The hallways were nearly deserted now, the occasional flicker of the lights casting strange, distorted shadows that danced across the walls. My footsteps echoed loudly, the sound unnervingly out of sync with the silence around me. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the hallway, a janitor stood with his back to me, pushing a mop back and forth. Something about the way he moved was wrong. His motions were jerky and mechanical, like a marionette on tangled strings. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, he stopped mopping and turned his head toward me. His face was pale, almost waxy, and his eyes were hollow pits of darkness. A twisted grin spread across his face, revealing rows of sharp, yellow teeth. I bolted. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted down the hallway, my shoes squeaking against the floor. Behind me, I heard the sharp clatter of the mop hitting the ground and the heavy thud of footsteps. The janitor was following me. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a set of stairs leading down to the basement. Without thinking, I descended, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was pitch black, the faint hum of electricity the only sound. I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to cut through the darkness. A narrow beam of light revealed rows of old lockers, their doors hanging open like gaping mouths. Something moved in the shadows. A low, guttural growl echoed through the space, and I whipped the light around, my hand shaking. The beam caught a glimpse of something, a figure crawling on all fours, its limbs twisted and unnatural. Its head snapped toward me, and I saw its eyes, empty sockets that seemed to pull the light in and swallow it whole. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my phone. The thing let out an ear-piercing screech and lunged. I turned and ran, the sound of its claws scraping against the floor filling my ears. The maze of hallways seemed endless, every turn leading me deeper into the darkness. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. Doors slammed shut behind me, one after another, as if the school itself was alive and trying to trap me. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing heavier with each passing second. I burst through a set of double doors and found myself in the gymnasium. The bleachers were empty, the overhead lights flickering erratically. In the center of the room stood a circle of students, their backs to me. They swayed gently, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. The students turned as one, their faces blank and lifeless. Their eyes were black voids, and their mouths stretched into wide, unnatural grins. They began to chant, their voices low and guttural, the words incomprehensible. The floor beneath me trembled, cracks snaking outward from the circle. From the darkness within the cracks, I saw movement twisted, writhing shapes clawing their way out. I ran for the doors, but they slammed shut before I could reach them. The chanting grew louder, the walls vibrating with a sound. A cold hand clamped down on my shoulder, and I screamed, spinning around. It was the janitor, his face inches from mine. His grin widened impossibly, his teeth glinting in the dim light. The room plunged into darkness, the chanting and the vibrations swallowing me whole. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering above. My heart raced as I looked around, but everything seemed normal. The lockers were closed, the floor clean, the air still, but I knew better. I could feel them watching me, waiting for the right moment. I was trapped in Blackwood High, and it wasn't going to let me go. The invitation arrived on crisp, elegant stationery, embossed with golden filigree. It promised an evening of enchantment, mystery, and potential romance, a gathering designed for young, single professionals seeking connections. Sarah, lonely after moving to the city, thought it could be fun, even thrilling. The allure of meeting someone in an enigmatic setting was irresistible. Besides, what harm could a dinner party be? When she arrived, the mansion loomed like a predator on the horizon, its silhouette carved against the night sky. Towering spires reached into the darkness, shrouded by a dense fog that seemed to curl and writhe with a life of its own. The iron gates creaked open on their own, as though anticipating her arrival. She hesitated, but the soft glow of lights from the mansion's tall windows coaxed her forward. The foyer was vast, cavernous, and deathly quiet. Candles flickered in wrought iron chandeliers, casting shifting shadows on the marbled floor. She called out a tentative hello, her voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. No one answered. A long table stretched ahead, draped in crimson velvet, with crystal glasses and golden plates set for a feast. But there was no sign of life. A sudden, deep thud echoed behind her. She whirled around to find the grand doors shut tight. Panic surged as she tugged at the handles, but they wouldn't budge. The air around her grew heavy, pressing against her chest. It was then she noticed the faint, whispery laugh echoing through the halls. She turned toward the sound, her pulse hammering in her ears. Her footsteps echoed as she wandered deeper into the mansion. Hallways twisted and branched like a labyrinth, lined with portraits whose painted eyes seemed to track her every move. The air grew colder, and a faint, rotten stench wafted from somewhere unseen. Then the lights dimmed. Shadows deepened and twisted into grotesque shapes. A low growl resonated from the darkness, vibrating through the walls. She froze, every nerve screaming for her to flee. The growl grew louder, morphing into guttural snarls. And then she saw it. A figure emerged from the darkness, impossibly tall and shrouded in a swirling black mist. Its glowing red eyes pierced through the gloom, locking onto her. The thing's head tilted, steadying her with a grotesque curiosity. Its skeletal fingers, impossibly long, reached out as it stepped forward. She bolted. The mansion became a maze of terror. Every corner turned revealed another nightmare, a pale, eyeless woman in a tattered dress drifting silently toward her. A hulking shadow that moved faster than any human should, hands clawing out from the walls, grasping for her. The air was thick with the smell of decay, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the endless halls. Her footsteps faltered as she reached a room with a single ornate mirror hanging on the wall. Her reflection stared back, but it wasn't her. Its mouth moved, whispering words she couldn't hear. Then her reflection smiled, a twisted, malicious grin. The mirror cracked, and a deafening scream erupted from it, forcing her to cover her ears as the glass shattered outward. She ran until her legs ached, her vision blurred by tears. But no matter how far she went, the mansion seemed to shift around her, closing her in. She found herself in a grand hall with a massive fireplace. A cold, oppressive presence filled the room. She spun around, but the demon was already there. It towered over her, its skeletal face contorted into a horrific grin. The ground beneath her feet seemed to melt into darkness, and she felt herself sinking, unable to move. Dozens of faces appeared in the shadows around her. Young women, their eyes hollow, their expressions frozen in eternal terror. They reached out, their cold hands grasping her arms, her legs, pulling her down. Her screams echoed through the mansion, swallowed by the oppressive silence as the shadows closed in. The last thing she saw was the demon's face, impossibly close, its whispered words searing into her mind as the world went dark. The mansion stood still once more, its windows glowing faintly in the night. Another invitation lay waiting to be delivered, its elegant calligraphy promising an evening of enchantment and romance. First and foremost, thank you for your continued support on the channel. It is so deeply appreciated, and I greatly enjoy connecting with every one of you. Which creepy story did you enjoy? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more eerie tales, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If there are particular stories you want to hear, please let me know. Until next time, my friends.